Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to Nourishing Your Body lunch and opening session. Is everyone's body nourished? Is everyone avoiding the Grey Poupon? Excellent. So to open up this session, I'm going to invite up to the stage Brother Nihad Awad, who is CAIR's National Executive Director and co-founder, who started this lovely organization 24 years ago. So I'm going to invite him up to the stage right now, and then joining him is Brother Jimmy Jones, and he is an 8-year national board member. So if the two of you could please come up on stage and do the real opening, we can get this show on the road.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be to you and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to CAIR 2018 National Leadership and Policy Conference. Thank you so much for joining us. Many of you have traveled from out of town, so welcome to Washington, D.C. And those who are coming for the second or more than the first time, welcome back to Washington, D.C. For those of you who are joining us for the first time at CAIR, let me just tell you a brief description of what CAIR is. The Council on American-Islamic Relations is America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. It was founded in 1994 in Washington, D.C. And we have today more than 33 chapters and offices nationwide. The main vision of CAIR is to be a leading advocate for justice and mutual understanding. Our mission is to enhance the understanding of Islam. Obviously, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about Islam and Muslims today in the United States. Protect civil rights, protecting the civil rights of all Americans. Promoting justice. Justice for all, empowering American Muslims. And mashallah, all praise be to God, we have seen how the American Muslim community is coming up as a proud, engaged American Muslim community. The theme for this conference is We the People, Organizing for Justice, Vision 2020. Just a few moments ago, Hussam Aloush, the executive director of CAIR LA, gave a beautiful khutbah sermon Friday. You all know, and our viewers who are watching from C-SPAN, that Muslims conduct their weekly prayer on Friday around noon. Hussam Aloush today delivered the weekly sermon at the beginning of the conference, and he focused on the concept of justice. Justice for all, not just for us. Justice for everyone. Whenever you witness injustice, it is not only about the injustice inflicted against people. It becomes about you, about your role. What do you do? Are you a witness? Are you a bystander? Do you get involved? Do you make a difference? Do you believe in yourselves? You have to be involved and you have to make a difference. You have to speak out. You have to organize. Today, the American Muslim community, as Brother Hussam said, is facing difficulty. Our nation has been facing difficulty, not only in the past 2 years, but for many years. But in particular, in the past 2 years, Islamophobia is on the rise. Anti-Muslim discrimination is on the rise. Anti-Muslim bullying in schools is on the rise. And we Muslims are not alone. We're not alone in the fight against injustice. We are together with so many Americans who believe in justice for all. We have witnessed millions of Americans going to the street, protesting, speaking up and standing for American Muslims. They're not Muslim themselves, but they believe in the values that you and I hold dear, justice and equality for all. Likewise, any injustice in the society is injustice against us as Muslims, as Americans, as citizens of this great nation. And we have to be involved in every social justice issue in our nation. It is our cause, and we have to be there in the front line. But also, we realize that we and many people who reject hate, who reject Islamophobia and xenophobia, who reject anti-African American stigmatization and discrimination, those who reject unjust laws to prevent migration and immigration to this country, those who reject separating families at the borders, those who believe in equal pay for equal work, we should not be outnumbered and we should not be out-organized. And that's why we're holding this conference today and this weekend. We need better tools to organize better, to be more effective, and to make sure that our voices are heard. And that's why we look forward to hearing from those who organized in the past years, who ran for public office and who won. We are so proud that the Muslim community is not hiding and running away from politics. The American Muslim community, like many other communities, are moving to the front and they are running for public office. CAIR is not an organization that endorses any candidates, but we are very proud with the fact that we have two Muslim sisters running for public office, and hopefully they will be the first two Muslim women in the US Congress. And this is very important. But I would like you, many of you, to think about your future. I'm so glad that in the audience we have so many young people. We would like you to think about your future as a leader, not only as a follower. We have some great organizers who succeeded in their campaigns, and we would like to hear from them. So please keep this in mind as we move forward in the weekend. Network. Don't just sit down with people you know. Shake hand and move to someone you don't know, you have not seen before. Introduce yourself, where you are, what do you do, and learn from them. Tell them about who you are and what your plans are. And think about the future. And let me conclude. If Donald Trump, with zero political expertise and almost zero respect for others, managed to run and win, I assure you, those who have values and care about this country and its future, think about running, because you will win better than Donald Trump in the future. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalat, wassalam ala rasulillah. Being that I'm one of the oldest people in the room, I thought it might be helpful to give some perspective on this struggle and what it's been over the past half century. Yes, I am that old. I want to talk for a few minutes about CAIR and the cave. CAIR and the cave. And I want to do so by citing 5 time points. One is 1968, the second one is 1979, the third is 1997, the fourth is 2010, and the fifth one is 2016. 1968, I left Hampton Institute and went to Yale Law School because I was focused on social justice primarily for African American people. And my plan was to go to Yale Law School, to graduate, and to go to Congress, and to change the world. Well, that didn't work out so well for me. In 1968, this was the year of the Democratic National Convention, and it stunned me to see that young people were being beaten in the streets. Young black and white Chicano people were being beaten in the streets in 1968. 1979, I took Shahada after a very long journey to Islam, reading books and reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. It was a life-changing experience. In 19 1997, my son Malik Jones was murdered by a police officer in New Haven, Connecticut. And I still haven't gotten over it. In 2010, I joined the board of CAIR. I've been on the board for 8 years, and I've learned a lot about CAIR and the cave. What's this about CAIR and the cave? Believe it or not, in the Muslim American community and the broader American community, there's a debate going on about how you protest and should you protest. We know in the broader American community there's a debate about this. And we know in the Muslim community there are people who say it's haram or forbidden to protest, haram or forbidden in Islam to vote, haram or forbidden to run for office. The reality is that if we think for a moment, many of us who are Muslims, who are practicing Muslims, we read Surah Kahf every Jummah, every Friday, right? And in Surah Kahf, you have the cave. The story of the young men who betook themselves to the cave because of what was going on out there. But the reality is that if you hold on, because some people say that's what we should emulate, you'll see that Muslims believe that the Quran is the word of God. We have examples of Dhul Qiddah, for instance, and we have other examples of being involved, or what we would call civically involved, in helping to change and improve the world. All you have to do is look at the story of Musa that Brother Hussam talked about today in that same surah. What does this say to us about CAIR and the cave? The reality is that our two founders, Nihad and Ibrahim, their personalities, you know them very well, are not the same, right? The reality is that we have different talents in this room. The reality is that we take on our responsibility for social justice in very, very different ways. So it's not either or. It's not either join CAIR or the cave. It's about the business of being an American, being a part of the American protest tradition, and about making change and looking at 2020 as a time when we all need to come together, Muslims and non-Muslims. As Malcolm X said in his autobiography, which started my journal, Islam, he says, "I'm for truth no matter who speaks it. I'm for justice no matter who it's for or against. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as such, I'm for whomever or whatever benefits humanity as a whole." So either CAIR or the cave is a false choice. Let's join together to make this country better for everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, brothers Nihad and Brother Jimmy. Just housekeeping, are we going to change the structure of the stage right now? So if you bear with us just for 1 minute, we're going to restructure the stage just so we can make it a little bit more one-on-one style and get the podium out of the way of the conversation. If we could get our speakers up on the stage for the first session, that would be great. right, so I think we're going to get one more mic up on the stage, but...
Got one for everyone.
All right, so this is our first primetime session. This is Spurred to Action, Cultivating Promising Muslim Leaders to Run for Office, How to Build a Movement Behind Your Campaign for Office. So my name is Robert McCaw. I'm CAIR's National Government Affairs Director. I've been with CAIR for 7 years. And I am delighted to have on stage 3 people who have run for office, been elected to office, or hold positions, or are running for office right now. So to the left of me, I have Dr. Abdul al-Said, who's the former candidate for governor of Michigan in the Democratic primary. He received 340,000 votes in the Michigan primary. It's amazing, and it's a hallmark for the Muslim community, and he's also a very dedicated public servant. To his left, we have Yasmine Taeb. She's the first Muslim elected to the Democratic National Council, and she's running for state senator in Virginia. And so, very excited to have her up on stage. And then we have, to her left, Nadeem Mazen, who just retired, and I bet he's grateful, from the Cambridge, Massachusetts City Council, and he is a co-founder of Jetpac, which is a Muslim-focused PAC that is developing leaders in the Muslim community, getting them ready to run for office, and then helping them once they're there. 2 sides of Jetpac. And so instead of going into each one's biography, I really want to get right into the questions, which really just get into the synopsis of today's panel, because we want to have some great 5-minute responses, kind of quick fire, and then we really want to hear from you, the audience, asking some questions and finding out how you, hopefully aspiring Muslims who also want to run for office, what you can do to get your campaign lifted off the ground. So the first question for all the panelists here is, how did you successfully build a grassroots campaign that reached beyond the Muslim community? And did you start building momentum from within the Muslim community and branch out? Or was your movement rooted in the multitude of different communities that you were a part of? And who would like to go first?
Very polite group up here. First and foremost, I just want to say to CAIR, thank you for hosting a conference that I think is really important, particularly right now. I'm really honored to be joined with 2 pretty awesome folks, and I'm really excited to see what both of you do, and good luck with your race. For me, I've always tried to be rooted in the Muslim community. Both of my parents have always been very active. But I'll be honest with you, when I struck out and said I'm going to run for governor, the folks who were the first to question whether or not it was even possible tended to be the Muslim community. And it's not to say that folks didn't come around in the end, but it is to say that we as a community are often very, very quick to undercut our own. I remember sitting down with an uncle early on, and I said, if I looked exactly the same and had the exact same pedigree and background, but my name was Juan and I came from the Latinx community instead of the Muslim community, you would be all about this. But my name is Abdurrahman and I come from your community, and you remember me being a punk when I was in high school, and so there's no way in your mind that I could ever run for office, right? Because politicians, like I've always been told, don't look like me. And so that was important learning for me. And so there were a lot of folks in the community who just said, no way, but there were also those in the community who said, we're behind you. And for me, I was really, really blessed and lucky. I have one of the best father-in-laws in the world. You could imagine coming up to your father-in-law and saying, hey, I'm gonna run for governor, meaning I'm not gonna be employed for 18 months, and I'm gonna ask everybody I know for money. And then being like, wait, so the whole time you would intend to stay married to my daughter, is that what you're saying? But, they wrote me my first 2 max-out checks. And, we had a baby in the middle of the process and moved in with them. And so I'm just very, very thankful for that. So there were the true believers in the Muslim community from the get-go who said, we're behind you and we're going to be with you. But really, my biggest early support came from the progressive community. And I think building movements is kind of like gardening, right? You plant a number of seeds and then you tend to them one at a time. You're not trying to water all of them at the same time. You come and you give one water, you go to the next one, you water that one, you come back to that one and make sure that there's no bugs on the leaves. And so you've got to really build multiple movements at the same time. But what I will tell you is that watching those movements come together and crest and having rallies where you'd have, the Muslim group in one corner, right? You'd have progressives in another corner. You'd have BLM activists in a third corner. You'd have, indivisibles in a group of soccer moms from the suburbs in the fourth corner, all coming together around one movement, right? And watching the Muslim community see that and the validation of that, I think, was incredibly important. And alhamdulillah, we didn't win our primary. That's not how it ended up. But we were able to build a movement of people who kept each other together and were engaging each other. And those are still relationships that you'll talk to some auntie and she'll ask you about somebody she met at one of your rallies, a BLM activist, and she'll ask, how's that guy doing? And it's just a beautiful thing to see.
Thank you. And I think there are some probably amazing Venn diagrams between aunties that are BLM and indivisible. And it's powerful to see how you uplifted the community and gave them a new vision for what Muslims can do. Who would like to go next? All right, Yasmine.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert, and to my co-panelists, and thank you to Nihad and to all of you for being here and for all the great work that CAIR does for our community on a day-to-day basis. So I tend to, for better or worse, I tend to agree with Abdul in terms of my experience in the races that I've run. So I do want to just quickly talk first about my experience running for the Democratic National Committee in 2016, and then I'll pivot over to what I've been experiencing right now running for State Senate. So in 2016, so first of all, the seats that folks that are elected to the Democratic National Committee, so every state has about a handful of spots on the DNC. These are pretty coveted seats. Virginia has 5 elected representatives to the Democratic National Committee. These are 4-year terms. These are the infamous superdelegate positions that you continue to hear about. So when I initially decided to run for the position back in 2016, most of my kind of very early supporters came from my friends, millennials, progressives. I didn't really have the strongest supporters came honestly from that community as opposed to my own community. And, it's difficult for folks that when folks put themselves out there, people from our community, when we actually step up to run for office, it's not easy. It really isn't. When we're talking about running for office during this administration that, again, on a day-to-day basis is demonizing our community, is attacking us, and folks like everybody in this room that's working on issues that we're trying to fight for our communities, trying to defend our rights and liberties, and individuals running from our community are the best people that will be able to fight for us, right? Who else will be better to represent us than someone from our own community? So I mention this because it's been this ongoing battle where there are folks from our community that are so incredibly supportive, but then others who are not that optimistic that we will be elected, that they want to see certain benchmarks reached for them to eventually invest and support and contribute to your campaigns. So when I was running in 2016 for the DNC and ultimately got elected, I became the first Muslim woman ever elected to the DNC. And while that was great, it was also shocking to me that I was the first one. And that was the year that we got a handful of other Muslims elected to the DNC. And I, again, want to mention that race because I want to encourage folks in this room to run for these positions. When we're talking about making sure that even our allies are constantly speaking up for us, and I'm sorry, but there's one party right now that is trying to fight for us, but we still need folks in that party on a day-to-day basis to fight for us, to push back on this administration. And for us to be able to do that, we need to be at that table. So the only reason that you'll see resolutions coming out of the DNC now highlighting issues important to our communities, it's because there's Muslims on the DNC now. It's because we are constantly talking to Tom Perez. It's because we have a deputy that's Muslim American himself. That's huge for our community. So first I wanted to mention that, and then pivoting to my state Senate race. So I announced for state Senate in Virginia a month ago, and that the primary is in June of next year. And similar to Abdul, again, the strongest supporters and donors, honestly, to my campaign thus far has been leading progressive figures in Virginia politics. I mean, our campaign that we're running right now is really based on this inclusive campaign that is going to be pushing for, raising the minimum wage to living wage in Virginia to $15 an hour, making sure that we're, again, prioritizing and defending and fighting for the rights of immigrant communities in Virginia. The district I'm running in is a majority minority district, so more than 60% are non-white, and it's been represented by the same person for the last 40 years that's been missing. Has honestly, in my view, has done nothing for these communities. And our community itself, our Muslim community, so for the ones of you that are familiar with that district, Dar al-Hijra is in that district. There are thousands of Muslims in that district. And the person that has represented this district for the last close to 40 years, he has not stepped foot in that masjid. We've had attacks at our masjid. There was press conference at that masjid with Congressman Beyer and other electeds. He has never stepped foot there. There's a reason why I'm running, right? There's a reason why it's so important for us to step up and run for office, and it's so incredibly important for us to support one another, right? Again, it's so challenging running for office during this time, and I think that, not to again get pessimistic and disappointed, but it just makes it even more challenging when folks from our own community doubt us. So, for the most part, I think that it's the surge in the number of candidates running from our community has been amazing, and I've seen CAIR and other organizations be so incredibly supportive and encouraging of that, and for that I'm so incredibly thankful.
Thank you very much. And Nadeem?
All right, thank you so much for having us. I have to echo the statements of my colleagues over here, who, by the way, both have great choices in shoes, well dressed. I'm just so proud to see our generation coming up and looking sharp while we're doing it. I've had the same exact experience. When I ran the first time, the Muslim community in my city is large. It's not majority minority in aggregate, but certainly there's a huge amount of opportunity in the city of Cambridge and greater Boston and across this country for more diverse representation, and we're not making good on that potential. And indeed, the folks within my community were not as supportive as they could have been my first time out. I had one gentleman say, you got to de-emphasize your Muslim heritage. Not that I was emphasizing it at all, and then I'll donate to you. You're going to face some hardship. I'm looking out for you. I'm helping you out.
Sure.
And when I ran, I just ran as myself. I'm someone who sticks up for social justice issues. I built a grassroots campaign by going door to door. I didn't go to the Muslim doors. I didn't go to the black neighborhood doors. I didn't go to the white neighborhood doors. I went to all the doors. And when we go to all the doors and meet people, you get a grasp of the issues, and you realize that the truth, that the social justice priorities, that the obvious projects and improvements that we want to make in our city or in our country are on the lips and in the hearts of almost every single person you meet. And yet somehow there's a huge disconnect between almost every elected body and that sense of almost obvious social justice tenor, that there is an internal, I don't want to say fitra, there is an internal compass that most people in this country have in terms of looking out for others, in terms of planning for the future, in terms of cutting out corporate interests. Even the Republican Party now, the company of big business, is parroting this social justice mantra of draining the swamp, whether or not they're doing it. It is so popular to be just, but we're so disconnected from the opportunity to do so. And so when you visit people's homes, when you engage them, when you re-engage them over email, over social media, by revisiting, by sending postcards, you build this grassroots support, and it's very powerful. And let me just say one more thing. The way that politics goes now is almost like it's almost like someone saw how grassroots organizing worked from like 100 feet away, and they're like, replicate what that person's doing. And it's like blurry and they can't quite see it. So it's like, send out 1,000 mailers and post $1 million in ads and sound like you care and tell people that you were in the military and do all of these things. And it's like, those things were good at a time in history because they meant that you were fighting from an authentic position of caring for other human beings. And now we have a lot of folks who are using essentially the marketing aspects of grassroots organizing. And they fail or they waste a lot of money because they're not doing so with the authenticity that my colleagues have demonstrated in their work. A few more things. I engaged stakeholders that were pre-existing. This work is so fraught and so stressful that you may make an enemy in your work with someone who should be an ally in the same work if you do not honor and understand the work that has gone on for decades prior to you coming on the scene. And as this audience is very young and as we're fairly young here, it's just totally crucial to build a grassroots movement by understanding what is there and by being extremely diplomatic, even when you don't always find a way to build a coalition or agree with your allies. Indeed, in my second run for council, the folks who had been most difficult for me were huge, huge supporters, and it was because we were patient with one another. And I'll just maybe wrap up by saying, better than being patient is being accepting of reality. I spent so much time over the last 4 or 5 years being upset with things that didn't go the right way, upset with people who didn't seem to be acting honestly, upset with the election of a president who didn't seem to be authentic or to represent the values of the people, neither his people nor our people. And patience is like holding on. It's like holding on to the monkey bars and eventually you're going to lose your grasp. But acceptance is passive and it's easy. We can live in a difficult society, and I gather it will become more difficult as time goes on, not less, without diminishing our strength and our ability to organize. And indeed, we must organize and we must continue to organize irrespective of the enormous weights and the enormous hurdles that are placed in front of us. So don't bear the difficulty ahead of you with patience in your organizing. Instead, grasp or reach towards a higher and more sustainable standard of doing the work you want to do, of knocking doors, of reaching friends, of connecting with people over social media, and do so with absolute forbearance and absolute acceptance of what's not going right.
Thank you. So my follow-up question kind of drills down a little bit deeper. And if you look in the audience, I don't think we have really many people that have ever run for office before. So what advice would you give to a first-time candidate, someone exploring their options to run for office, and how do we get them past exploring to just, jumping into the fray and, building a campaign behind them, building an authentic movement? We heard some of the organizing skills from all of you, and we heard some of the, initial skepticism that you could get from some in the Muslim community, and also how you can also draw support from that. But what would you say to the first-time candidate looking to build a movement behind them? How do they find that authentic voice? What would you tell them to push them forward to 2020?
So I'm gonna look at this part of the room, just because this is the youngest part of the room here. I'm looking right at you. Look, I have so much hope in the future because of the young people I see and the passion and the excitement, who always are building on all the incredible work that the the generation that has come before has done and will continue to do. But there are a couple of concerns that I have, and I'm just going to lay them out. Number one, politics is not. It is not a short-term enterprise. It is. I mean, so I was talking to a group of young people, and when I was probably 12, 13, we didn't have MP3s. We didn't. If you wanted to hear a song, you couldn't just pull it up on your Spotify and play it. And it was funny. I was hanging out with my younger sibling, and Spotify wasn't working, and he really wanted to show me something. We both got really frustrated at Spotify, and I started thinking for a second. I was like, back when I was young, if you wanted to listen to something, maybe you got lucky enough to have a tape recorder, and you could tape record it off of the radio, and your mom would be yelling in the back, because of course you were listening to something she probably didn't want you to listen to. So it was like in your radio, like your mom reminding you probably shouldn't be listening to this. And then maybe you could play like 2 minutes of what you were wanting to listen to. So all I'm saying is that politics is similar. If you think you are going to get any sort of immediate gratification from doing this work, it's not going to happen. And that's because it is deeply human work. And human work takes a long time. So building the skills of human work is one of the most important things I think people have to do as they think about potentially engaging in politics. What do I mean by that? Learning how to listen before you speak. Learning how to stay positive in the face of frank, sometimes abusive, being told that you are not good enough, you can't, they won't, whatever it is. You are going to be refused over and over and over again. Number three, recognizing that optimism goes a long way. How many times, and I'm sure each of the other folks up here, how many times you have the experience of being told no and no and no and no again, and then meeting somebody who's told you no 5 times, and on the 6th time, they're like, I'm super excited about this. I've been with you all along. And you're just like, in the back of your head, you're like, wait, what? You've been with me all along? What? And you're just like, I know you have, thank you. And the ability to be able to sustain a patience and an optimism in the face of refusal is critical. Number 4, our community, and specifically we as a generation, we take things personally. And if you're gonna run for office, looking like we look, with the name like we have, praying like we pray, you can't take it personally. One of the interesting things and interesting conversations that I'm watching is this conversation about safe spaces. And I understand the importance of having a safe space in moments where you're not quite geared up to be taking the kind of abuse in the world. But I just want you to think about people like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. These are not people who demanded a safe space and got real upset when the safe space was violated. Their goal was to create a safer space for everyone else and willingly engage the challenges of their space, and to do it honestly and to take it for the team. And look at what they were able to do. And in our community, we've got to be willing to engage, to keep a smile on our face, to have a conversation. So everybody watched the Khabib fight, I'm sure. Me and Khalid got in some arguments online over it. But one of the interesting things was that, Khabib fought a great fight. And then he went and did what he did. And the question becomes, well, is he justified? Is he not justified? If you want to jump into the arena of politics, you play on those rules, even if sometimes they're not fair. And then the last thing I'll just say is find really good people and build really strong relationships with them. And seek to always be generous, even if sometimes the circumstances are not generous to you.
Wow, thank you. Yasmine?
Sure. So let's see, advice for first-time candidates. I think for anyone that is interested in either running for office or just getting involved in politics, as Abdul said, you have to be in it for, not only just the right reasons, but you have to be in it for the long haul. So generally when someone approaches me and tells me that, they are interested in running for something in the community, I try to give them kind of concrete steps and advice in terms of what they should try to do before announcing. So for instance, if this is someone that has recently moved into the community or has just gotten involved, I would, definitely for anyone interested in running for office, I would say first reach out to your local commissions to see if you can get appointed to local commissions. These are advisory boards on different issues that you can get involved in. Try to see if you can get involved in state commissions, state boards that your government appoints folks to from the state. And then, making sure that you're out in the community, right? And whether it's, if it's someone from our community, making sure that you're there for the service events that the AAPI community is doing one weekend, or you're there at the churches, filling up the Thanksgiving baskets, right? So for folks that are interested in running for office, I do absolutely think that the first most important thing is you have to be in it for the right reasons. And so long as you know that you want to run because you want to serve as a representative for your community, because you feel as though you would be a better voice for your entire community, then those are great reasons to run. And as you're kind of working towards, building that support and taking those concrete steps to make that official launch into running for office, I think it's also critical that you reach out to key allies and key folks. Again, it's been mentioned, folks from different communities that we need to be working with. And this is, the labor community, this is the progressives, this is the faith community. So right before I announced my bid to run for state senate a month ago, I had dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations with the leaders in leading progressive organizations. This is MoveOn.org, this is PCCC, this is Indivisible, this is some of the leading labor unions, because I wanted to first have that conversation with them, let them know that they matter to me, that the issues that members of their communities raise with them, it matters to me as a candidate, and I wanted to learn from them, and I wanted to see how I could better champion those issues as a member in the Virginia General Assembly. So, you have those conversations, again, to show that not only you care for the rights and liberties of everybody in your community, but you want to show that you're being respectful, right? You want to show that, I think Abdul mentioned this as well. For anyone that runs for office, you'll see that it's an incredibly humbling experience. It's a lot about listening to the concerns of your constituents, going door to door, talking to them about ways you could be a better person, ways that you could serve them better in office, and making sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to make yourself a better candidate. So I would say that as long as if you're interested in running for office, don't be discouraged. And I agree with Abdul that you will hear a lot of no's leading up to it, but the more you invest in the process and the more folks that you talk to, and surrounding yourself with great, caring people that support you and want the best for your community at large, I think that that's the right approach to take.
Thank you. And Nadeem?
First of all, if you're thinking of running for office, you should go to the Jetpac website right now at jet-pac.com. We're a 501c3 nonprofit training folks to run for office. And as a nonprofit, we are training folks before they run for office. We're training you to be a community organizer first, an authentic social impact committed person before you stand up and go for the higher level recognition. There's far too many people running for office from a position of ego, and we want you to run for office from a position of service. In my story, I ran out of obligation. And in fact, I told my community a lot. The only really thing I talked about for my Muslim identity is this idea of fard kifaya, the idea that if a social obligation of the whole is not being met, it is up to each and every one of us to drop what we're doing to ensure that obligation for the collective. And there are many obligations that are not being met in America, from housing to fair wages to all kinds of health care, elder care, social care, care of the sick, all kinds of stuff. right? And that's the American social contract, let alone the higher level contract that many Americans have with God in giving of themselves in charity and in service. So I tried to get 4 or 5 other people to run. I started going to city council meetings. I said, this is absurd. It's crazy that these people have been here for so long, that they're not telling the truth, that they're not being clear, that they are not operating out of service, that it's so obvious that we're not going to run to displace these folks. I tried to get 4 or 5 people to run, and they were too busy. And I was too busy, but I ended up doing it, and I won my first race by just 6 votes. So it gives you a sense of the importance of knocking every door and chasing every dollar. Here's what I encourage you to do in particular. I encourage you to look at how few votes it will take you to win in your race. I had a friend who ran for Congress, U.S. Congress, House of Representatives, in a majority-minority district with someone who had been not working as hard as he could for very long. She won that seat with I don't know what it was, 12,000 or 15,000 votes. It's one of the highest offices in the land. With 12 or 15,000 votes, you can get that in line at Starbucks if you spend 10 years doing it. Meet people at Starbucks. This is how I ran, by the way. Everywhere I went, I took people's contact information down. If you met 3 people a day for the next 10 years, you'd be pretty close to a congressional seat.
MashaAllah.
Okay, 1 year for a local campaign, 2 years for a state senate. And if you want to raise money and do it faster, you could get it done in 3 or 4 months. Meet people as you go and figure out what your targets are. Be or get a solid analyst. It's crazy to me that politicians aren't analysts. You look at the budget, you understand where waste is happening. You look at minority communities and socioeconomic inequity, you look at educational inequity, and it's obvious that black communities in Cambridge are not getting the same educational experience as white communities. Be the analyst who looks at it and says, this is not right. This is not how we spend money. This is not how we train teachers. You raise the question, you tell the truth, and you create a solution. We allocated $30 million to arts and culture in Cambridge that I had to fight for tooth and nail, even against my allies at one point when they thought it was a lost cause, and that money was going to go to high-end co-working space. So you can have a huge impact if you can actually read between the lines and look at where the opportunities lie. Very briefly, because I know we're running into question time, we do need help in the party. I'm a member of the Massachusetts Democratic State Committee. I am the senior member of the Minority Outreach Committee at this point. I'm the senior member, guys. We need your help, okay? And if you're a Republican, the Republican Party definitely needs your help, okay? And I can tell you for sure I'm not doing a good job. I travel, I'm busy, I teach, I'm here, I'm in San Francisco, I'm in Boston. We need your help if you are a solid contributor, and you don't have to grab a title or be appointed to any given thing in order to make a huge difference where people need your help. Lastly, I didn't really have to compromise a lot on council. I went from winning by 6 votes to winning by the most votes out of anyone running for council. And we're all at large in Cambridge, so that means I got the most votes out of people who have been running for 20 years. You got to bring the people to the conversation. The people are not in the conversation. And when the colleague that's sitting next to you sees 25 people from his neighborhood that should be voting for him showing up and speaking on behalf of your obvious observation about social justice, that's scary for incumbents. We have incumbents in Cambridge switching their tune from a corporatist tune or from a I'll say whatever people are noticing or need to hear tune to a I'll say the right things and I'll do the right things tune because of who is showing up in Cambridge, Massachusetts discussions and who's beginning to show up across Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a purple state. It's not a blue state. And it's one of the bluest states in the nation. So if you have a particular ideology and you believe that you want to see it committed and you believe that those around you would like to see it committed into law, into governance, into funding, well, that ideology needs to be committed through showing up and actually doing the work, not just you, but your neighbors. And for all the naysayers watching C-SPAN wondering what I mean by ideology, I'm talking about the prison industrial complex. I'm talking about a living wage. I'm talking about workers. I'm talking about white, blue-collar workers in Ohio. I'm talking about black workers in Pennsylvania. This is the ideology of those who have been paying attention. And we need those people who have been paying attention to actually show up on the municipal level, on the state level, on the lower, less glamorous levels, to all of these meetings and committees to share their voice.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have about 7 minutes. Nope, not yet. Don't clap because now it's your turn. We have about 7 minutes, which means we have about 2 or 3 questions that can be asked from the audience. We should have someone with a microphone. What? No, those were time warnings. But I think we'll take the first question right here, and if we can borrow a mic from the stage. The brothers, second row.
Okay. I'm Ibrahim Mukman. I have a question. I'm with Masjid Muhammad here in Washington, and I listened to all of you talk about your techniques and your steps, and I was just fascinated that you all talked about the importance of going door to door. I'm curious, as an older guy, how do you integrate grassroots stuff with the social media and the stuff that all the young people are doing now in a campaign?
How do you visually knock on that door?
So I ran statewide, and there's no way in God's name, even in 18 months, if you start, now you knock on every door. But what you do is you build a group of people who then knock on doors. Our campaign knocked on probably about 1.5 million doors. And that's because we were having the same conversation. One thing that none of the three of us said, but I think is critically important, don't run to be something, as in the words of President Obama. Run to do something. There needs to be a set of things that you want to fix and a reason why you want to fix it. And that conversation you need to be having with everyone via every platform all the time. Now, people talk about this technical idea of message discipline. Message discipline is just knowing exactly why you want to run and being willing to say it over and over and over and over again in every different medium. So you tweet the same message as you Facebook Live, as you say at the doors, as you say on the phones, as you say via text. So it's just being consistent, deeply consistent, and making sure that that message shines through. What are you about? I'm about getting corporate money out of politics, giving people health care, making sure that the environment is taken care of, and knowing that we have a real employment issue coming forward.
Just because we have 2 minutes left, I'm going to try to get one more question asked, and we can have one more panelist.
Can I give you a 30-second follow-up?
Yes,
Just make sure if you're going digital to do video. Video summaries, high-quality video, a good video package for your masjid or your group will cost you $1,000. I can give you advice on what to buy. Get good at using it. It takes an hour or 2 to get trained up. And then disseminate with quick 1- and 2-minute videos. It's a huge impact, and you may not get a ton of votes or a ton of parishioners or a ton of donations, but you will disseminate a lot of critical information that will change people's lives.
Actually, I just want to hear from Yasmine, because I watched your candidate announcement video for Senate, and I was really moved by that. I saw it on Facebook. Can you just give us a little piece on what that was like?
Sure. So you can actually go and watch the announcement video. It's about 3 minutes. It's on my website. It's Yasmine4Virginia.com. That's FOR Virginia.com. Yeah, I mean, in the video, I clearly articulated why I was running for the position, but I think that, again, for any candidate running for office, I think part of your narrative has to also be about who you are, right? Your personal story. We all have very compelling personal stories. So the reason why the announcement video was powerful was because I talked about my personal story, but then I related it to my district, which again, as I mentioned, it's an immigrant heavy, it's a majority minority district. And when I talked about how my family and I fled Iran as refugees and came to the US, and we actually came to the US through the southern border, we jumped over a fence. So a lot of the experience that I had coming to this country, living as an undocumented immigrant, a lot of the voters in my district could relate to that. And then specifically talking to the importance of why someone, with that background, with that story, is critical to stand up for similar folks in our community, right? We keep talking about why we want to encourage minorities, women, millennials, women of color running for office is because representation matters, and we need to ensure that our elected officials really represent our better representation of our communities as a whole.
Thank you so much, Joe. I have time for one more question. We got 1 more minute. Right back there. If we could just get the mic over.
Okay, hi. So my question was, what can we as the younger generation, what do you think we can do to help our community and help future elections?
All right. 30 seconds. What can we do to make sure our community what?
What do you think we should do to help the community and like elections since we're the younger generation?
How can the younger generation impact this election? 30 seconds each panelist.
Money, votes, and analysis, right? So that we need to make sure that your parents, and eventually when you're earning, are giving. We give to charity, we're required to give to charity, and then we give over and above, and we make investments for our future. We are too tight-fisted as a community. There are communities that are outspending us by double-digit % of income. We must be giving to politics. And then we must be going door to door, just even if you never plan on doing anything political, know your neighbors. It's more likely to invite someone to an event through Facebook than to go down and invite them in person. Learn to be personable and humane, and analyze. Be a voracious watcher of C-SPAN, or a voracious reader of content. And there is quite a bit of good analysis right now, and we should be able to ferret out what is good and to disseminate what is good, and to distinguish what is fluff. And there is a lot of fluff on the left. We need to be much more diligent.
Sure. So I think the most important thing for young people from our community can do, especially as we're leading into the midterms less than 3 weeks away, is, obviously making sure that you're encouraging your friends, your colleagues, your parents, your family members to vote, making sure that you're doing everything you possibly can in the next, 2.5 weeks to volunteer, give your time to those candidates that are going to be fighting for our values. And there are candidates right now in this area. I'm going to make one plug for the 10th Congressional District in Virginia, very critical race. We have one candidate who's going to be fighting for our community, who's going to be standing up for us. We need to make sure that that candidate is elected. There's very key things that your folks, young people from our community can do really leading up to the midterms, and just if you can volunteer your time, making sure everybody you know will vote, that would be huge.
So I'm gonna give you a challenge. 3 things. Number 1, I want you to go to a political meeting. And don't just go and sit in the back. Go, raise your hand, ask a question, and get involved. Talk to the candidate. 2, do a shift knocking on doors for whatever candidate you want to knock on. Could be somebody who's running for school board, could be somebody who's running for Senate. I don't care. Go knock on some doors. Number 3, have lunch with somebody you know you disagree with. Sit them down and talk it out. And that ability to just sit there and deal with disagreement and learn how to have that conversation is one of the most crucial skills you ever build.
I'd say a round of applause, but we already got one. So with that, we're going to transition to our next panel. 2 panels. We have 2 different panels, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. Yep. And just remember that CAIR is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we don't endorse any candidate or party, but we wish all candidates and parties good luck.
We're over one head-to-head. My panel is your panel.
All right, everyone can hear me? So I don't believe in walls, but we need to draw a wall so we can bifurcate this room for our next 2 panels. So we're going to need everyone just to clear the room for like 5 minutes. Take your personal belongings with you. We're going to split the wall straight across. This is the only time I'm going to tell people to get out of the way for a wall.
I don't even know how they survived that. They got both friends.